Okay, it is 4 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Couple things to start off with. First, if you are here and you haven't used Helm, you are completely welcome to stay, but you might get a little lost because we are going into some of the details about Helm 3. Also, I'll go over what we're going to talk about, but first an introduction to myself. I'm Taylor Thomas. I am one of the core maintainers of Helm. I've been working on it for a while now. And I wanted to do this discussion today more about deep diving into Helm 3 and what it's going to be like. So the structure is going to be a little bit different. I don't want to just present to you. I want to get some feedback as well. And so I'm going to show all the topics I would like to mention that we could talk about, and then I'll start through the first one that I think is probably the biggest question on people's minds. And then I will stop after I describe that section and I will ask for questions or feedback. And then we will keep progressing. So we might not get through all the slides. However, these slides are on the schedule page. You can download them there, and those have all the information that are in them. So before I start, just a couple big thank yous. First off, to the rest of the Helm core maintainer team. Helm 3 is not something that's easily digestible. There's a lot of different components and things that we've learned, and so I am very grateful to the rest of the maintainers who have helped put this together. Also specifically Josh Dolitsky, who's one of the maintainers. He wrote a lot of this content and I was able to reuse it. And also to CodeFresh. They provided these beautiful slides that I didn't have to do, so they're actually pretty. So just a big thanks to them. If you haven't heard of them before, go check them out. I hope this kind of shows that Helm 3 is very much a bigger effort than just what Microsoft puts in. So I work for Microsoft, but Helm is supported by various companies who contribute to it. It is really a community project. So to understand, before we go into these different features that we're going to have, we have to understand where we came from to go into why we've decided to do the features that we're doing. So all the way here on the left, the original thing of Helm was called Kate's Place. It was developed at a Deis hackathon. Deis was acquired by Microsoft. You have Helm v1 was announced at the very first KubeCon. It functioned very differently than we're on Helm v2 right now. And then Helm merged some of the Google Deployment Manager into the code base as well. And then in 2016, we released Helm 2.0. Most people who have used Helm at this point have used Helm 2.0. We had Helm Summit at the beginning of this year in Portland, Oregon, to start discussing Helm 3 and what that would look like. We had a whole day on that. And then recently we had Helm join the CNCF. So you'll see on all the CNCF things here that Helm is its own separate project now. And then the question of questions. When will Helm 3 be released? Soon. So just to give a little bit of details around this, we're not giving a specific, like, it will be released on January 27th, 2019. We're not saying that yet because we don't have a specific idea, but I can give you some timelines. The alpha is coming pretty soon. Let's just say that. So keep on your toes for that. That'll be coming out. Once again, it will be an alpha, so there'll be some things missing. But then we're hoping to get Helm 3 out in the first part of next year. What's the first part, you say? I'm not going to say because I don't want to make a commitment on behalf of everyone else. But it will be coming out. We're not trying to delay this or stretch this out to make it a problem for anybody. We're just trying to make sure it is well put together for the community. Because we learned a lot of lessons between November 2016 and now. Kubernetes has advanced from, I think when it went to Helm version 2, I think we were at Kubernetes 1.4. I might be wrong on that. But we're all the way at 1.12 at this point. And so there's been a lot that's changed in Helm in Kubernetes that we have to take into account with Helm. Now, just one more note around this being an exact date. If anyone's company is interested in providing resources to help with this, not financial resources, but engineering resources, we are more than welcome to that opportunity. So if your company has an interest in helping out with Helm, just come talk to me, and I will try to get you in touch with the rest of the core maintainers. So another thing, in just big, bold letters here, this is the Helm 3 project board. We've had a lot of people express some confusion at where's Helm 3? What's going on? It doesn't look like anything's going on. So to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, we've put everything into this GitHub project. This shows what has been done, what we're currently working on, and what's still in the backlog. But if you haven't been aware of this yet, we haven't been allowing one-off contributions to the version 3 branch because we're doing a bunch of refactoring work that is extremely critical to make sure we get right. If we don't do that right, it will make contributing to the code base harder and make less of a good software project. So we're not accepting one-off single feature contributions yet, but if you want to dig in on actually contributing specific large chunks of Helm functionality, you can take a look at that project board and reach out to any of the maintainers, and we'll see if we can set that up for you. Okay, so major changes to expect in Helm 3. This is just going to be a quick overview of what each one is. I'm not going to dive into it, and then we're going to go dive into each individual topic. So just note that many of the things we talk about are still in flux right now. We're still hammering out a few of the last details, and they're going to probably have some changes from what you see right here by the time it's actually released. As we dive into the examples, I'll try to note when those are things that we're pretty sure will change or other questions. So first off is the embedded Lua engine. That will be the thing that will be used for hooks and also for advanced chart usage. We'll dig into that in a second. Next thing, the removal of tiller. Okay, this is extremely helpful because if you've used Helm, which if you're here you probably have, if you've used Helm, then you've probably run into problems with tiller or worried about the security of it. We remove tiller here. Yes, exactly. Cheers. Anyway, so now there is also the chart repo authorization, so you can log into a chart repo and be able to upload charts. So this is like Helm push, and you can push a chart. And then last, there is a new version of the chart.yaml file. So, and then also just to note, we might get into these at the end if for some reason we have time. These are other major Helm 3 changes. So there's managed hooks, meaning if Helm creates something with a hook, it will delete it. Index.yaml will become index.json. Since this is a deep dive, the reason why is YAML parsers are slow. So we are switching it to JSON because the JSON parser, I think, was at least 2 times faster. It might have been 3 times faster. And so we're moving that over, and it's going to be partitioned out for performance. So you're no longer going to have one big index file. It's going to be partitioned out. Also, we'll be able to schematize your values file. So you'll be able to specify what types of values are acceptable in your values file. And then Helm client libraries will also be much better. Right now, if you try to use Helm inside of like a Go project, you end up importing like kates.io/Kubernetes, which is never a thing you want to import. So we're going to make sure that the client libraries are much better for everyone to use inside of another client. Okay, first off, the elephant in the room that everyone freaks out about, the embedded Lua engine. So the whole idea here is we want to make Helm charts more robust and programmable. How many of you are familiar, like really familiar with at least one of the stable charts in the stable repository? Anyone? Okay, a few people. Okay, those charts are immensely complex. They're kind of actually like their own programming language on the inside. You have if, then, else blocks inside of there, and you have a bunch of stuff going on. So this will make, the idea was, why don't we do something where you can actually do some programming behind it? Now, this is going to go over what this is going to look like. This API is not finalized in any way yet. We're still implementing these details right now, but I know it's been worked on. Okay, a couple things first. The big note here, you do not have to use Lua in your charts at all. Let me repeat that one more time. You do not have to use Lua. That's everyone's first question. If you have a chart, it will work. The Lua is there as an advanced use case or as an escape hatch for more complex needs. So it can be used with the current things or in place of the current YAML templates that we have. It will also start treating Kubernetes resources as objects and not strings. We all know, if we've done any programming at all, that it's much easier to try to do like object dot something and change a property than it is to go modify a string inside of a YAML file. And so that's kind of the idea behind a Lua engine, is that now we can treat those Kubernetes resources as actual objects and not string manipulation underneath the hood. It also gives this new eventing system. Right now you have the pre and post install and upgrade hooks. Those pre and post upgrade hooks and install hooks and delete hooks have some problems. They're great for beginning or simple use cases, but once you want to do something more complex, it becomes way more difficult. And so having a Lua engine in place, we can now intercept those events and act on those events using an actual programming language. Now, one of the other things is that Lua we chose after looking at multiple languages. It wasn't somebody's pet language. We actually stacked up different things. Matt Butcher wrote a blog post on that. He's one of the other maintainers of Helm, if you really want to look at the details of it. But one of the big reasons is we can embed it in Go, and it's sandbox, so you can limit access to the network or to specific I/O things, which is good for security. One of the other possibilities here is that you'll be able to develop and import reusable library charts of some kind. I'll show an example of that in just a second. And another thing to note is any Helm plugin will also have access to the Lua runtime, so you can trigger events and consume those events inside of the Lua scripts that you have. So first off, this is what we currently have in Helm, right? So you have a few templates or things from the values or release file. But in Helm 3, this is, once again, this could totally change. But this is what it could look like inside of Lua. So in this case, you're saying, hey, create an Alpine pod, and here's all the pod things that you can do. And so, like, for example, you can see a difference here. So you can say heritage, release.service, or Helm. So the defaulting is a lot better and cleaner than what we have with the default template directive. And that can then be used like this. So let's say you have that create Alpine pod. You can say require like my library, my pod library. I want to get a new Alpine 3.7 pod. And so now you have this pod object, and I'm going to change that restart policy to always and add it into my manifests. Once again, that is not the stable API. That could look completely different, but that is something that's much easier to use than even the current like reusable chart stuff we can pull in for like deployments. Like the common chart is what that's called. So this adds a new library chart version, or the ability to do that, and also to manage hooks. So I'm going to stop there. Are there concerns or questions about the Lua engine? Yes, in the back. Yes, and then Helm will install it. So what will happen is when you call that create Alpine pod method, it's going to come into here. It's going to pull out all of these, basically this pod, which is like a generic pod definition, with the name of the container that you've passed in. And so then instead of having to manually copy paste this every single time. No. Yeah, Helm will do the magic behind the scenes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yes. So the question was, is it required to use this? And no, you do not have to use this. You could keep this as it is right here, but you can also supplement it or do other things with the Lua. The question was, can you mix the two? Can you mix YAML and Lua? The answer is yes, that is the current plan. I don't think that would change, but we want to make sure that you can start, for example, if you are an owner of a chart, you could start adding in new things without wholesale having to replace it all with Lua. Yes? So the question was, do we have plans to make it pluggable? Can you change out which scripting engine? I can't remember the official thing that we decided on, but I'm pretty sure we're leaning towards that will be possible. Even right now, you could implement a separate templating engine for Helm 2. The thing is there. Nobody's ever done it. So I believe that will be available. I'm not sure if what that plugin model will look like, though, if we go that way. Yeah. So the question is, are we going to provide tools to convert for the Helm 2 to Helm 3? I am pretty sure we're going to be creating a tool to help migrate anything that needs to be migrated, but I don't think we're going to have anything that will just take your Helm 2 chart YAML and turn it into Lua for you. I don't think there's a plan to have that, because that would be that could be pretty dangerous, because right now you have, like I said, in the charts that are fairly large, you have big logic blocks, and that's really hard to parse out and turn into another language. And so we don't want to accidentally mess up something that way. So I think it's easier to just let whoever's maintaining the chart move that over. Okay. We'll move on to the next thing then. So, yay, no more tiller. So the big thing here is that we're improving the security of this by just moving our authorization to Kubernetes. So one of the big problems that you have right now with Helm is that tiller runs as a pod, and for it to do its job, it often has to have a lot of access to your cluster. Now, once again, that's why understanding where we came from with this. When we created Helm 2, we didn't know that things like CRDs would be created in the way that they were, and things have really evolved, and different paradigms have come around because of it. So now we know that the better option is to move all of this client side and just basically talk to the Kubernetes API. So all the rendering and everything is done through the Helm client now, and there's no tiller. What that does for us, besides the auth, is now you have a different way of storing the releases. This is one of those things that is in flux right now. We're finalizing the final spec on what the storage will look like. But right now, what happens is when you store a release, it's a config map that has basically the whole release object kind of compressed down and stored inside of it in Kubernetes. But now we're going to have a release and a release version object that will contain what is the release name and basic data about it, and then specific versions, so that keep track of, so you can still have that Helm rollback functionality, and you can roll back to a specific version. So that's going to be the main difference there. So what this looks like now, so here's the current Helm 2 model. So we have to have gRPC set up, and as we've known, if you followed the Helm project at all, we've had plenty of problems whenever we try to upgrade gRPC or do anything around it. And so getting rid of that will really help. So then you have tiller, and tiller talks to the Kubernetes API and stores things in config maps. What this now will look like is we'll have the Helm CLI. It talks over HTTP to the Kubernetes API. And then that Kubernetes API will have the CRD objects that will keep track of the releases. And then it'll install into that. Okay, so there's the removing of tiller. Does anyone have any questions with that? That one's big, but I don't think there's going to be too many around this. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's the entire chart. Once again, that's the one where I know they're changing this. They're finalizing the spec right now. If that's the way we go, I can't remember what we're doing, if we're keeping a version of the chart somewhere or not. That's one thing I don't know. But like I said, that spec, I know they were writing, so it should be finalized and out in the next week or two, I think. Yes. So the question was, do you need to upgrade your Kubernetes to be able to use these new APIs or the new CRDs? And the answer to that is, as long as you're using a fairly recent version, which I think CRDs became the thing in 1.7. Anyone want to correct me? Okay, 1.7. Okay, so in 1.7, so as long as your cluster is newer than 1.7, which I think if you're using any of the cloud providers, I don't think any of them support 1.7 anymore. If you're doing your own and you don't have 1.7, you might have to upgrade. But as long as you have the support for CRDs in there, then you'll be able to do this. Okay, any other questions on that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question is about backwards compatibility between the new Helm 3 stuff and the Helm 2. I believe, and if we don't have it in the works right now, we will. We'll have a tool to help convert one to another in terms of like what storage or some sort of shim to make sure that we can keep track of anything that's there. Our goal as we've been designing Helm 3 is we're making breaking changes, but we don't want to break everything. So we don't want to make it a pain for users who are that would defeat the purpose. So we're trying to make sure that whatever we do in Helm 3, it will still work with your old things. Yeah. So the question is, does it change how you pass authorization and authorize with Kubernetes? The answer is no. You're using, underneath it's just using the kates.io/client go library. So the normal Kubernetes Go client underneath. So it's going to be using the same authorization mechanisms. So kubeconfig, that it reads and uses the token and then authenticates with the Kubernetes API. And so whichever user is running it, it's going to be running as that user, and the RBAC roles for that user will apply. So if that user doesn't have permission to deploy into the namespace they're trying to deploy, they'll get denied and get an error. Yeah. So it simplifies that a lot because now we're using the exact same model as anyone else. Yeah. The question is, are there any problems with working with KubeFed version 2? The truthful answer for me is I don't know, because I haven't looked at the version 2 stuff yet. I'd imagine that it wouldn't, just based on, like, as long as you have like the same, like, you're normally, if I remember the version 1, which is what I'm used to, you're logging in through that federation control plane. As long as you have the authorization and you can talk to Kubernetes, it should be able to just work for you. But I can't guarantee that until I look at the version 2 spec more and understand. No, I personally haven't. I don't know if some of the other maintainers have. So that's something we can probably talk about, or if you're worried about it, you can bring to the Helm dev call, and we can talk about that. Yes? Yeah. Yes. So the question is, will you still have all the same functionality with listing releases and getting statuses and all that? Is that correct? Okay, of releases that are already there. Yes, the plan is we're trying to make sure that that is backwards, or we have some sort of way for you to like run a migration path. I don't know if we finalize if we're going to like give a tool to migrate all your current things over to a Helm 3 and then you install Helm 3, or if it is going to be a run a shim and then it talks through that shim or whatever it might be. So that's what I know of right now, and I can dig into that some more. Yes. No, there isn't. So sorry, the question is there a controller for the CRD? There is not a controller for the CRD. It is just purely used as a storage backend. One of my initial plans when we were talking about Helm 3 was actually using a controller mechanism where we would submit a CRD and then that would be deployed. And that's what inspired these CRD objects, but we're like, we're going to run into the same security problems that we had with Tiller, and so let's just make this client side. So we're just using it as a storage mechanism. Yes? Yeah, so is the information for the Helm release stored in the CRD? Is that your question? Oh, okay. So how does this work as a storage layer? Is that the question? Oh, okay. Sensitive data. Okay. So the question is how to store sensitive data in the API. I believe that's what we're addressing with the new spec that's going to come out. So we want to address like how we're storing like things that are secret and all those details around that. So I would have to check with the final spec when it's done. I was warned before I gave this talk that that's one of the things that's going to change, that they're finishing up. So I am not certain what exactly they're going to do with it, but I know that's one of the considerations that they've brought into the final spec for it. Anything else around this? Okay, awesome. Sorry, it is getting hot in here. I hope nobody falls asleep, but whew! Okay, so next thing. This is a pretty big one. So this is a chart, repo, authorization, and upload. So there are new commands and an API spec for working with chart repositories. This is another thing where actually someone came in with another idea for this that's really compelling, and they're having some final debates around it right now about where charts can be stored. For example, like inside of an image repository, sometimes alongside with the same image that's generally run. So, but that's not a final thing. This is something that they're debating. But no matter what we go with, we're going to have a Helm push command that uploads the chart to a repo. So instead of having this like manually have to upload, or as Chart Museum made it easier, you could submit it to that API, but now you have a Helm push command that you can say Helm push the chart you just built, and it'll push it up. As I said, that push spec is still being finalized. We can also have plugins that are there and can specify custom protocols. One of the common ones is like with an S3 bucket or with an Azure storage container, so that you can push to a specific storage backend. We also want to add a Helm login, or we are going to add a Helm login command to authenticate against a repository, just like how you have Docker login to log into a container repository. The plan is for that to be an OAuth to authorization flow, so you have a bearer and token authorization. And you'll be able to do things like limit which users can upload and install which charts. I know that's one of the big things inside of a company is everyone's like, wait, I don't want these users to be able to install these like really important charts or that are special for this group or whatever. I've heard so many stories about that, and so this is going to address that by allowing people to limit who uploads and downloads those charts. So just if you want to know where that HTTP spec is coming from, it's based on what Chart Museum is right now. It's using that as kind of the base protocol for it. You can follow that discussion through the community repo, github.com/helm/community, and I think there's some discussion in there. So what that will look like. So this is the current Helm 2 flow. You have to do like a HTTP basic auth through your repository. You have to package up the chart, and then you generally have some script that has your chart and can upload it to the right repository, and then you can update your information about it, and then you can install that chart. And generally, this custom uploader involved like making an index file. You'd have to re-index for your repository. But the idea in Helm 3 is that this becomes Helm login, and it'll do the whole flow for you. I want to add whatever repo I just logged into. I'm going to push that chart to a repository, and then you can pull it down. So there's no more this custom uploader logic that you have to do yourself. I'm happy about this because every company I've been at, I've generally implemented some sort of custom chart repository. So this will make it much easier from that perspective. Okay, questions about this? Yes? So the question is, where are the roles coming from for the repositories? These roles are part of the API spec. They're not going to, because you don't have to host your charts on a Kubernetes cluster. So it's going to be its own spec. That's delving into some of the details that I don't know. That's where actually Josh Dolitsky and Matt Farina are the two maintainers who are working on that very directly, and they'll know this very specific details, but I know that it's part of the actual spec they are writing. Sorry? Yeah, we talk about that on Thursday calls, and they might have had a separate call recently to discuss more of the last details around this. Yes. So the question is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is there going to be a new way or like standards around writing charts, especially big charts where you have umbrella charts and other things around that? There will be updates based on all the new like Lua spec stuff that's coming in. We haven't written those documents yet because it's not implemented, but there will be more details around how we want to update the best practices guide for charts with the new options that we have available. Yes. Mm-hmm. The question is, so with this new push mechanism, and because it's based on Chart Museum, are we required to use Chart Museum? Is that a good way to say it? Okay. And the answer to that is no. It's based on what we learned from Chart Museum. It isn't. Chart Museum is a great option. Like right now, if you need a solution, it's a good option. But it's not the requirement for this. This is just giving the ability to have a spec that can be implemented by anything. Any other questions on this? Yes. Are the charts going to be updated for this new spec? Oh, Chart Museum. Yes, the Chart Museum will be updated for this the new specification that they come up with. Josh is the maintainer of that, and he's the one writing the spec, so it will be updated. Okay, so we have just a little bit more time, and I'm actually allowed to get to the last major change. So this new chart.yaml. The current chart.yaml files will not be broken by the new changes here. Basically, we are combining the requirements.yaml file, which was created in the first place for backwards compatibility. We didn't want to break certain workflows, but the requirements file will no longer exist. And so what this looks like is right here, the Helm 2. You have your requirements.yaml up here, and then your chart.yaml. And instead of these being separate files, they'll now be combined into a single chart.yaml file that specifies your dependencies for that project. This is something that just changed before I wrote this talk, so once again, the final spec documentation is coming, but it's not there yet. This is just a very recent change that was decided upon. Any questions about this part? Okay, that's good. Just last things here. If you want to know more about Helm 3, the main design proposal is at the master Helm v3. We're starting final documentation of the Helm specs right now, so that could update soon. We'll try to put a note in there that points to the final specification. This was the design proposal was where we were working on it as we kind of fleshed out the ideas. And now we're to the point where it's like finalized specs. If you want to see what is going on, all of this is public. You just have to go to the dev v3 branch inside of Helm, and that has all of the things we've done thus far. So, for example, I know Tiller's all the way out. I think we're getting close on the Lua engine. It's not all the way there, but that's all in place. So, we have like 2 minutes if there's any other burning questions people have. One more in the corner, yes. So I think you came in after I talked about this. So a reminder for those who did come in late, the alpha is coming soon, pretty soon. And we're hoping to release by the first part of next year. Once we get these final things in place, we'll be in a good place for an alpha. Yes. Release alpha. Yeah, release alpha like very soon. And then next year will be like the GA. We'll move to like a beta and a GA. Okay, I think that's about it for time. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or ping any of us on Slack.